She stood up right in the middle of the family dinner and raised her glass high above her head. Every single person at that table turned to look at her. The room had been loud just 1 second before. Laughter, plates clinking, kids running around near the back door, and then, like someone turned off a switch, everything went quiet. She looked straight at me, not at anyone else. At me, and she smiled the way she always smiled when she was about to say something she knew would land like a stone in still water. "I just want to take a moment," she said, loud enough for all 43 people in that room to hear every single word, "to congratulate my little brother on another year of absolutely nothing." I did not move. I did not speak. I set my fork down very slowly on the side of my plate. Because I had been waiting for this moment for a long time, and she had absolutely no idea what was coming. My name does not matter. What matters is that I know this feeling. And if you are watching this right now, I think you know it too. That feeling of being in a room full of people who were supposed to love you, and realizing that the person causing you the most pain is the one sitting right across from you at the dinner table. I grew up in a house where my older sister was the favorite. That is not a complaint. That is just the truth. From the time I was old enough to understand the way our family worked, I understood that she came first. She was the one who got the new clothes at the start of every school year. She was the one who got the bigger bedroom. She was the one our parents talked about at every gathering, every holiday, every Sunday dinner. She was the star. I was the other one. I was not angry about it when I was young. You do not really understand those things when you are a child. You just know what is normal in your house and you accept it. Our house was one where my sister was celebrated and I was, at best, an afterthought. That was normal to me. But as I got older, I started to see it more clearly. I started to notice the way my parents lit up when she walked into a room and went slightly dim when I did. I started to notice that my achievements, small as they were back then, were mentioned briefly and then forgotten, while her achievements, even the ordinary ones, were treated like headlines. She passed a test. It was a miracle. I passed the same test. Nobody said a word. I want you to understand something about the kind of person I am, because it matters for this story. I am not a dramatic person. I do not like conflict. I have spent most of my life trying to keep the peace, trying to make things smooth, trying not to be the one who causes trouble. That is not weakness. That is just the kind of person I became because of the environment I grew up in. When you learn from a very young age that speaking up does not help, you learn to go quiet instead. So for most of my 20s, I just worked. I kept my head down. I built something slowly and quietly, the way you build something when nobody is watching and nobody is cheering for you. I moved into a small apartment. I worked long hours. I saved money carefully. I made decisions that were not exciting to talk about at family dinners. And every time I showed up at those dinners, I had to sit there and listen to my sister be celebrated, while I sat at the end of the table like a piece of furniture. And every time she took a shot at me, I let it go, because that is what I did. That was my pattern. Let it go, smile, change the subject, keep the peace. But things had been building for a very long time. And that night at dinner, something was different. I cannot explain it exactly. But I knew, sitting there with my fork halfway to my mouth when she stood up with her glass, I knew that this time was going to be the last time. Let me take you back further, because you need to understand the history before you can understand why that night mattered so much. The first time my sister truly humiliated me in front of people, I was 22 years old. It was a birthday party for one of our cousins. There were maybe 20 people there, all family. My sister had just gotten a promotion at her job, and she was in one of those moods where she needed everyone to know how well she was doing. I had just started a new position at a small company, nothing impressive, just an entry-level role that I was quietly proud of because I had worked hard to get it. My aunt asked me how work was going. I started to answer. I said I had just started a new job and I was learning a lot and I thought there was real potential there. My sister cut me off. She actually spoke over me mid-sentence and said, "He means he got a job answering phones, Auntie. It is nothing to get excited about." The table laughed, not meanly, most of them. They just laughed because my sister delivered it like a joke, and she was good at that. She had this gift for disguising cruelty as humor. For Ma King, something that should have hurt feel like a punchline. And because everyone laughed, I felt like I could not respond without looking like I could not take a joke. So I smiled, and I said nothing, and she moved the conversation back to herself. The second time was worse. I was 25. I had been dating someone I really cared about, a woman I had been with for about a year. She came to a family gathering for the first time. I was nervous about it in the way you are always nervous when you bring someone into your family for the first time. I wanted it to go well. I wanted my family to make her feel welcome. My sister spent the entire evening telling stories about my failures. She did not do it in an obvious way. She was too smart for that. She did it through what sounded like nostalgic family stories. Remember when you got fired from that retail job? Remember when you drove the wrong way and got lost for 2 hours? Remember when you forgot to pay rent and had to borrow money from Dad? Every story she told was technically true, but she told them in a way that made me sound incompetent, unreliable, and small. And she told them with that smile on her face, the one that said, I am just being funny, I am just being family, what is the problem? The woman I was seeing did not say anything to me that night, but 2 weeks later, she told me she thought my family was unkind and she did not want to be around them. We broke up shortly after. I do not blame her. Looking back, I understand. I tried one time to talk to my sister about it. I know people say you should try to have those conversations. I did. I called her on a Tuesday evening when I had worked up enough courage, and I told her that the things she said about me in front of people were hurting me, that I did not appreciate being the joke at family gatherings, that I needed her to stop. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, I am sorry you feel that way. I was just joking. You have always been too sensitive. And that was it. No real apology, no acknowledgement, just a redirect of the problem back onto me, as if the issue was not what she did, but how I received it. I want to ask you something right now, before I continue. Have you ever tried to tell someone who was hurting you that they were hurting you, and had them respond by telling you that you were the problem? Have you ever been made to feel like your pain was the real inconvenience in the situation? If you have, you already know how that moment felt to me. And if you have found this channel, I want you to know that you belong here. Every story on this channel is about someone who chose to stop carrying that weight in silence. Subscribe right now if you want to be here for the rest of this one. So I stopped trying to address it. I stopped trying to fix it. I did what I had always done. I kept my head down and I worked. I made decisions that I did not tell my family about, not because I was hiding anything, but because I had learned that sharing things with them just gave my sister more material to use at the next dinner. For 3 years, I worked on something quietly. I had started a small business on the side of my regular job. It was nothing glamorous. It was a service business that I built step by step. I reinvested everything back into it for the first 2 years. I did not take vacations. I did not upgrade my apartment. I did not buy anything flashy. I lived like I was still broke because I was still in the building phase and I needed every dollar to go back into what I was creating. So from the outside, from my family's perspective, I looked exactly the same as I always had. Quiet, working, living simply, not impressive. Meanwhile, my sister had bought a nice car and taken 2 international trips and told everyone at every opportunity about her salary and her apartment and her life. She was, on the surface, the success story. And I was, on the surface, still the afterthought. But that night at dinner, the surface was about to crack. I had come to this dinner because it was a birthday celebration for my father. He was turning 60 and my mother had organized a big family gathering at their home. I did not particularly want to go. I want to be honest about that. Every one of these gatherings left me feeling a little hollowed out, a little less than a little tired. But it was my father's birthday. I loved my father. I went. The table was long and set up beautifully. My mother had cooked for 2 days. There were flowers and candles and photographs of my father at different ages lined up along the windowsill. It was genuinely a lovely setting. I arrived on time, said hello to everyone, hugged my father, sat down near the middle of the table. For the first hour, things were fine. The food was passed around. People talked. Kids made noise. My uncle told a story that everyone had already heard 3 times before, the usual rhythm of a family dinner. My sister arrived late. She always arrived late because arriving late was its own kind of entrance. She came in with noise and energy, and everyone turned to greet her. She hugged our parents, complimented the table, kissed cheeks. She was wearing a new outfit and she looked confident and bright, and everyone was happy to see her. That is the thing about my sister. She could make a room feel warmer just by walking into it. That was her actual gift. I did genuinely admire that about her, even through everything. She sat down across from me, caught my eye, gave me a small nod. Nothing unfriendly on the surface, just a nod. The kind that said, "You are here, I see you," the level of acknowledgement I would give a lamp. The dinner continued. The main course was cleared. Dessert was brought out. My father made a short, emotional speech about how grateful he was for his family, for his life, for the years he had been given. There was not a dry eye in the room. Even I felt something loosen in my chest when he spoke. It was a beautiful moment. And then my sister stood up. She was still holding her wine glass. She had that look on her face, that bright, ready look, the one she got when she was about to perform. And I use that word deliberately. Everything my sister did in public was a performance. She knew exactly how to hold a room. "I just want to add to what Dad said," she began, and several people smiled and nodded because whatever she was about to say, they expected it to be good. She talked for a minute about our father, about his values, about what she had learned from him about hard work and ambition. People nodded along. She was genuinely saying good things. I was nodding too. And then she pivoted, the way she always pivoted, like a dancer changing direction mid-step, smooth and deliberate, so you almost do not notice the shift until you are already somewhere else. She looked at me. Her expression did not change. That bright smile stayed exactly in place. "And then there is my little brother," she said. "Proof that not every seed from the same tree grows into the same thing." A few people laughed, uncertain laughs, the kind that are not sure yet if something is funny or not. She continued, "I just want to take a moment to congratulate him on another year of absolutely nothing. Still the same apartment, still the same situation, still somehow managing to show up to family dinners without anything interesting to contribute." She raised her glass. "To my brother, proof that potential is just potential." She said it like a toast. She said it with a smile. She delivered it the way a comedian delivers a roast joke, with warmth and lightness wrapped around a blade. And 43 people were looking at me. Some of them laughed, not all, maybe 10 or 12. The others went quiet. I saw my aunt put down her glass very carefully. I saw my cousin look away. I saw my father's face change, a subtle shift like a light had flickered. And I felt something that I had felt many times before in rooms like this. That particular kind of shame that does not come from guilt, but from exposure. The shame of being publicly defined as less than, of being handed an identity in front of witnesses and having that identity be small and meaningless and failing. Stay with me right now, because what comes next, the moment that happened in the next 4 minutes, is the reason I am telling this story at all. And I want you to feel every second of it the way I felt it. I sat very still. I did not look away from her. I let the laughter settle. I let the moment breathe. My hands were flat on the table on either side of my plate. My face was calm, not forced calm, real calm, the kind that comes not from having nothing to feel but from having decided what to do with what you feel. I had been carrying something for 3 years, something concrete, something she knew nothing about, something that was, by any measure, the opposite of nothing. And sitting there in that chair with everyone looking at me, I made a decision that I had been slowly making for a long time. I was done carrying it quietly. I looked at my sister. She was still smiling, still standing with her glass raised, waiting for me to shrink the way I always shrank, waiting for me to smile and nod and let it pass. I picked up my glass. I stood up slowly. The room was confused. This was not the usual script. The usual script was, joke lands, brother looks uncomfortable, sister sits down, life continues. I was not following the usual script. I held my glass up the way she had held hers. I looked around the table at every person in that room before I spoke. My uncle, my aunt, my cousins, my parents, all the family friends my mother had invited. And then I looked at my sister. And I said, calmly, clearly, without any emotion in my voice except a kind of quiet steadiness, "You are right that I have not said much at these dinners over the years. I have been a little busy. Specifically, I have been building a business, quietly, for 3 years." I paused for 1 second. "We crossed our first million in revenue 4 months ago." I put down my glass. I sat down. I picked up my fork. The room was completely silent. Not the kind of silence that happens when a joke lands. The other kind of silence. The kind that is almost physical. The kind where you can hear people breathing and nobody wants to be the first one to make a sound. My sister was still standing. Her glass was still raised. The smile on her face had not disappeared exactly. It had frozen. It was still there, technically, but it had lost whatever was behind it. Like a screen that still shows an image after the power has been cut. My father looked at me, and I watched something happen in his face that I had been waiting to see for 20 years. Recognition. Not just of the news I had shared. Recognition of me, of who I actually was. Of the space I took up in the world. My aunt, my father's sister, was the first one to speak. She said, quietly, more to herself than to the room, "Well, I never." And then someone began to clap. I do not even know who it was at first. One set of hands, and then another, and then a few more. Not thunderous applause, just the sound of people who had been given permission to respond and were choosing to respond with acknowledgement. My sister sat down. She did not say anything for a while. I could see her processing. I could see the machinery of it working behind her eyes. She was trying to find the angle, the way to reframe what had just happened, the move that put her back in control of the narrative. There was no such move. What I told my sister later that evening, when everyone had moved into the living room and the dinner table was being cleared, and we found ourselves briefly alone in the kitchen, was not an attack. It was not a speech. It was 3 sentences. I said, "I am not angry at you. I want you to know that. But I am done letting you speak about me that way in front of people." She opened her mouth. I could see she wanted to say something about how she was just joking, how I was too sensitive, the usual redirect. I did not give her the space for it, not with volume, not with anger. I just said, "Think about what you want our relationship to look like going forward. I am open to a real one, but I am not going to perform the role of the lesser one anymore." And I walked back out to where my family was. She did not come to find me again that evening. She said her goodbyes early, something about having to be somewhere in the morning. She hugged our parents. She did not hug me. But before she left, she stopped at the door and looked back at me across the room. And I will not pretend I know exactly what was in her face in that moment. I think it was a mixture of things. Embarrassment, yes, but maybe something else too. Something like the beginning of a recalibration. Like someone who has been certain of something for a long time and has just been given a reason to be less certain. I stayed for another hour. My uncle pulled me aside and shook my hand and said he had always known I had something in me. My cousin asked me about the business with genuine interest. My father, before I left, put his hand on my shoulder in the front hallway and said, "I am proud of you." I should have said that more. That moment with my father was worth more to me than any number. I want to be clear about that. The business, the revenue, the success, those things are real and I am proud of them. But they were not the point. The point was never to be rich. The point was to be seen, to be known for who I actually was. And in that hallway, with my father's hand on my shoulder, I felt seen in a way I had not felt in that house for most of my life. Tell me something before I finish. If you had been in my place that evening, if someone who had been dismissing you for years finally had to sit with the truth of who you actually were, what would you have done? Would you have stood up? Or would you have let it pass one more time? I would genuinely like to know. Put your answer in the comments below because I read them, and because your answer matters to this conversation. My sister called me 6 weeks later. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I almost did not answer, but I did. She did not apologize exactly. I want to be honest about that. She did not say the words "I am sorry" in a clean and simple way. What she said was closer to an acknowledgement. She said she had been thinking about things. She said she realized that some of the things she had said over the years had not been kind. She said she thought she had been, and she paused here, competitive in ways that were not fair. It was not a perfect apology, but it was something. It was more than I had ever gotten before, and I told her I appreciated her saying it. I told her I was not interested in making her feel worse about the past. I told her I just wanted to move forward. Efferently. We are not close now, my sister and I do not want to give this story a tidy ending that it did not actually have. We talk occasionally. We see each other at family things. It is cordial. It is calm. The sharp edge of it is gone, mostly. She does not take shots at me in public anymore. And when she talks about my work, she talks about it with something that, if I am generous, I would call respect. That is enough for me. I am not looking for her to become someone she is not. I am just looking for basic dignity, and that is what I have now. Something shifted in me that night, and it has not shifted back. And I want to tell you what it was, because this is the part I want you to take with you when this story is over. For most of my adult life, I had been waiting for other people to see me before I could feel seen. I was waiting for my family to recognize what I was building before I could feel like it was worth building. I was waiting for my sister to stop making me the punchline before I could feel like I was something other than a punchline. I was handing the definition of myself to other people and then feeling hurt when they handed it back wrong. What changed that night was not that I proved something to my sister. What changed was that I stopped waiting for her permission. I had the facts. I had the truth. I had 3 years of quiet, unglamorous, unsexy work that had produced something real, and I had been carrying it around silently, as if speaking it out loud somehow required her approval first. I did not need her approval. I never did. I just needed to stop behaving as if I did. You do not need the person who has been dismissing you to change before you can stand up. You do not need the room to be perfectly set up. You do not need the perfect words or the perfect moment or the perfect audience. You just need to stop shrinking on cue. You just need to stop playing the role they wrote for you. The truth always finds a way, and when it finally lands, it does not need to be loud to be heard. The quieter it is, the longer it echoes. That is what I want you to hold on to today. Quiet is not weak, still is not surrender. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in a loud room is stay completely calm, because calm, in the middle of chaos, is its own kind of statement, and nobody who sees it ever forgets it. If this story reached you today, if it found you on a day when you needed to hear it, please share it with one person who needs it too. One person who has been sitting at a table where they are made to feel small. One person who is carrying something real that the people around them cannot see yet. Share it with them. Because sometimes a story is the thing that helps someone realize they do not have to wait anymore. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it right now. I post new stories every single week. Stories about real emotions, real pain, and the moments when dignity finally wins. Click the video on your screen right now because the next story might be the one that changes how you see things. I will see you there. She stood up at my graduation party and asked the room if anyone actually thought I was going to do something with my degree. There were 60 people in my parents' backyard, string lights overhead, food on every table, people who had driven from other cities to be there. My grandmother was sitting in a chair near the back fence with a small cup of punch in her hand and a smile that had been on her face since she arrived. And my older brother was standing in the middle of it, all with a can of beer in one hand, and that particular grin of his, the one that meant he thought he was being funny. I stood next to the cake my mother had ordered 3 weeks in advance. I was holding a plate. I had been in the middle of a perfectly normal conversation with my cousin when the volume around me dropped, and I realized my brother was speaking to the group. I did not say a word. I set the plate down on the nearest table. I looked at him, and I waited. Because I had learned, by then, that waiting was its own kind of power. My brother and I grew up in the same house, slept in the same room for 7 years, and somehow ended up in completely different universes by the time we were adults. He was athletic, social, loud in all the ways that got rewarded in school and at home and in every room he walked into. I was quieter. I read more. I took longer to figure things out, but when I figured them out, I understood them in a way that lasted. He was the one people expected things from early. He had the kind of presence that made people assume success was coming. And for a while, It did seem to be. Good grades without much effort. A social life that looked like a highlight reel. A way of carrying himself that communicated without words that he expected to be liked and was right to expect it. But somewhere in his mid-20s, things had not gone quite the way everyone assumed they would. A business he started did not work out. A relationship ended badly. He moved back home for a year. And instead of processing any of that privately, the way I process things, he started to redirect. Started to make my ordinariness, my quietness, my slower and less glamorous path, the subject of a long-running commentary that he delivered mostly at family gatherings. I was the safe target, I think. I never hit back. I never made it uncomfortable. I smiled and absorbed and moved on, so he kept doing it. The first time it landed badly enough to leave a mark was at a family Christmas when I was 24. I had just started my second year of graduate school. It was not something I talked about much because I did not like people asking me questions about it that I could not fully answer yet. Academic work is slow and uncertain and hard to explain to people who are not in it, and I had learned that trying to explain it at family dinners usually led to glazed eyes and changed subjects. My brother raised it at the dinner table in a way that was designed to get a laugh rather than to understand. "So tell me again," he said, "how many more years are you going to be a professional student? Because some of us have actual jobs." Laughter from the cousins. A smile from an uncle who probably was not really paying attention. I said, calmly, that I expected to finish in 2 more years. He said, "And then what? More school?" I said I would be looking for research positions after that. He said, "Research, so you study things other people have already figured out." And then he moved on to talking about something else, leaving that characterization of my work sitting in the room like a piece of furniture nobody wanted to acknowledge was ugly. I want you to notice something about that exchange. He never asked a genuine question. He never wanted to understand what I was actually doing. The questions were not curiosity. They were weapons dressed as questions. And because they were dressed as questions, I could not respond to them as weapons without looking defensive. That is the elegant cruelty of it. You either answer the question, which means you are playing the game on his terms, or you push back against it, which means you are being too sensitive about a simple question. Either way, he won. I chose, for years, to answer the questions, to try to explain, and every time I explained, he found a way to make the explanation sound small. The second incident that stays with me happened at my cousin's wedding. I was 26. I had finished my graduate degree. I was in the early months of a postdoctoral research position at a university, which was a significant achievement, not famous person significant, but quietly, genuinely significant in my field. My brother came to the wedding with a new girlfriend. She was warm and curious, and she asked me what I did for work. I started to explain. I was about 2 sentences in when my brother, who was standing right next to her, put his arm around her shoulder and said, "He studies things nobody outside his department has ever heard of. It is fine. We love him anyway." She laughed a little, the polite laugh you give when you are not sure if something is a joke or not. I smiled and found a reason to go get a drink. I tried once to address it with him directly. I am someone who believes in direct conversation, even when it is uncomfortable. I met him for coffee, and I told him that the way he talked about my work in front of people bothered me, that it made me feel dismissed, that I needed him to stop framing my career as something lesser or absurd in public. He leaned back in his chair and said, "I was just joking around. You need to relax." And then, almost immediately, "You know, the problem with you is you take everything so seriously. That is probably why you like all that academic stuff. The rest of us live in the real world." I did not respond to that. I finished my coffee. I said it had been good to see him. I left. And I did not bring it up again. I just decided that I would do what I had always done. I would work, quietly, without needing his acknowledgement or his understanding. I would build what I was building, and I would let time do what time does. I want to stop here for a moment, because I think some of you watching this right now have had a version of that coffee meeting. You tried to say, clearly and calmly, "This is how you are making me feel." And the person you said it to did not hear you. They heard an accusation. They responded with a counterattack or a dismissal or a subject change, and you walked away feeling worse than you did before you tried. That conversation, the one where you tell the truth and the other person refuses to receive it, that is one of the loneliest moments a person can have. Because it tells you that you cannot solve this problem through honesty alone. Some people are not ready for honesty about themselves. Some people need tea. Some people need consequences. Some people need to be in a room where the reality they have been ignoring becomes too visible to keep ignoring. If you have been in a conversation like that, you are not alone. This channel is full of stories about people who tried the right way first and then had to find another way. Subscribe, because these stories are for you. The graduation party had been my mother's idea. I had not asked for a party. I had honestly expected to get my degree, go out for a quiet dinner with my parents, and that would be it. But my mother had put real effort and real love into this gathering, and so I was there, genuinely grateful for the people who had come, trying to be present for it. My brother had shown up an hour after it started. He had been pleasant enough in the early part of the evening. He talked to relatives. He helped carry a few things. For a while I thought maybe the evening would just be an evening. And then he picked up that beer and made that announcement. He said it loud enough for the whole backyard to hear. 60 people, my grandmother, my parents, my professors who had come, my best friend from childhood who had driven 3 hours to be there. Does anyone actually think he's going to do something real with this? Like, in the real world? And then he laughed. That particular laugh, the one that was designed to signal that he was joking, just in case anyone pushed back. I stood very still. The plate was down. My hands were at my sides. I breathed once, slowly and deliberately. Keep watching, because what happened in the next 60 seconds is the moment everything changed for my brother and me, and it was not what he expected. It was not what I expected either, honestly, but it was exactly right. I looked at him. I did not raise my voice. I spoke at a perfectly normal conversational volume, but clearly enough that the people nearby could hear. I said, I already have. He made a face, amused, still in joke mode. Yeah, what did you do? I said, still calm, 6 months ago I was offered and accepted a research position at the National Institute. It is a 4-year funded position, full salary, with access to resources most people in my field spend their entire careers trying to get. I paused for 1 second. I have been waiting for the right moment to share it. I thought my graduation party might be appropriate. I looked around the group, not to gloat, but to acknowledge them. My grandmother had both hands over her mouth. My mother looked like someone had taken a weight off her shoulders that she had been carrying for a long time. My father stood very still with his eyes doing something I had never quite seen them do before. My brother said nothing. His face went through several expressions in a short amount of time, the way a screen buffers. He opened his mouth once and closed it again. My professor, who had come specifically to celebrate this moment because she had written one of my recommendation letters for that position, stood up from her chair near the garden and began to clap. She was the only one clapping for the first few seconds, and then everyone joined. Not because I had defeated my brother. I want to be clear about that. They were not clapping for a defeat. They were clapping for a reveal, for the end of a long silence, for a piece of truth that had been waiting to be spoken. My brother put down his beer. He found a chair near the edge of the group and he sat in it. He did not say anything for the rest of the party. He ate some food. He said goodbye to our parents at the end of the evening and he gave me a look on the way out that I have thought about many times since. It was not a mean look. It was not an apologetic look exactly. It was something more complicated. Something like a person looking at a landscape. They thought they knew and realizing there are mountains in it they had never noticed before. He texted me 3 days later. It said, "Congrats on the job. I should have asked more questions." That was it, 12 words. But 12 words from my brother about something I had done without a punchline, without a redirect, without a joke at my expense, was more than I had gotten from him in years. I texted back, "Thank you." And then, after a pause, "I think we can do better, both of us." He replied, "Yeah, maybe." We have been doing better since then. Not perfectly. Not in the way that movies show reconciliations, where everything gets healed in a single scene and then the credits roll. Real life does not work like that, but we talk more. He asks real questions now, occasionally. He still defaults to humor in uncomfortable moments. That is just how he is built, but the humor is softer now, less designed to diminish. I am going to tell you the thing I learned from all of this, and I want you to listen carefully, because it took me a long time to understand it. For most of my life, I was building a case. I was collecting NCE that I was worth something, and I was waiting for a moment to present that evidence to a jury that had already decided its verdict. And the verdict, in my family, had been decided a long time ago. I was the quiet one, the uncertain one, the one who took the long road, the one whose value was theoretical rather than demonstrated. The problem with waiting for the right moment to present your evidence is that it means you are living your life for other people's verdicts. You are doing the work, yes, but you are doing it partly as a response to people who have dismissed you. You are letting their dismissal drive you. And there is energy in that. It does get things done, but it is not the same as building something for yourself. The moment at my graduation party was not the moment I won. The moment I won was earlier, much earlier, when I stopped caring whether my brother believed in what I was doing and started doing it because I believed in it. The graduation party was just the moment the truth became visible to everyone else. It had been true for a long time before that. You do not need the people who dismissed you to understand your value before that value is real. Your value is real right now, whether they can see it or not. Whether they are currently laughing at you or ignoring you or reducing you to a punchline at a family dinner. The truth always finds a way. It does not need to be dramatic. It does not need to be loud. It just needs time. And it needs you to keep showing up for it, quietly, consistently, without waiting for applause. The right moment will come, and when it does, you will not need to perform it. You will just need to say it, quietly, clearly, once. Because that is all truth needs. One clear moment to land. And after it lands, nobody in that room will speak to you the same way again. If this story reached something in you today, please share it with one person who needs it. Not for the channel, for that person. Because somewhere out there is someone who has been sitting in their own version of that backyard, absorbing their own version of that joke, and what they need today is to hear that it does not last forever. That the quiet work pays off. That the truth finds its moment. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do it right now. New stories every week, about dignity and patience, and the moments when real finally wins. Click the video on your screen right now because what comes next might be exactly what you needed to hear today. I will see you there. She told the entire office that I had only gotten my job because of my connection to the director. She said it in the break room on a Tuesday morning. 7 people were there. Coffee was being made. Someone was heating up leftovers. It was the kind of ordinary moment that was about to become something else entirely. I heard it from around the corner. I had stepped out of the room for 30 seconds to answer a text, and I came back to hear my own name being discussed in a voice that was not bothering to be quiet. I stood in the doorway. She did not see me immediately. She was mid-sentence, one hand holding her mug, the other gesturing in the air the way she did when she was making a point she felt confident about. I am just saying, she was saying, that some people did not get here the same way the rest of us did, and everyone in this building knows it. We just do not say it out loud. Several people were looking at her. 1 or 2 were nodding. One person, a woman who sat near me, was looking at her coffee very carefully. And then someone looked up and saw me standing there. The room went very quiet. Let me tell you who I am, and what my life actually looked like at the time, because context matters here. I had started at this company 14 months earlier. I had applied for the position through the standard job listing, gone through 3 rounds of interviews, passed a skills assessment that I later learned had a 30% pass rate, and received an offer letter with a start date. The process had taken 11 weeks. It was one of the longer and more rigorous hiring processes I had been through. The director she was referring to was a person I had worked with briefly at a previous company 3 years before joining this one. We were not close. We had been on the same project team for 4 months. We had not been in contact since that project ended. He did not recruit me. He did not flag my application. I had not mentioned him in my cover letter. The connection was so thin it was essentially not a connection at all. But somehow, in the story this woman had been telling, that 4-month overlap at a previous job had become the explanation for everything I had achieved here. I want to tell you something about what it feels like to be in an environment where someone is systematically reframing your achievements as the product of luck or connection rather than competence. It is a particular kind of corrose. Thing, because you cannot counter it directly without sounding defensive, and sounding defensive is treated as evidence of guilt. The story is written to make any response you give work in the storyteller's favor. If you ignore it, you are letting it stand. If you address it, you are being sensitive. If you succeed at something, it is still the connection. If you struggle with something, it is the evidence that the connection was the only thing propping you up. It is a trap, and the person setting it usually knows it is a trap. She and I had started at the company within a few weeks of each other. I had been aware from early on that she was competitive, which is not inherently a problem. Competitive people make environments sharper. But there was a quality to her competitiveness that was less about doing well herself and more about the idea that if someone else was doing well, they must not have earned it. She had a fixed-size idea of success, where someone else having some meant she had less. I had watched her do it with other people before she did it with me. A colleague who got promoted was whispered about as having been political about it. A new hire who was praised in a meeting was privately described as having a better relationship with the manager than their actual output warranted. She had a habit of finding an explanation for other people's success that did not involve their ability. I did not confront it when it was about other people. I should have said something. I did not. I kept my head down and did my work and told myself it was not my business. And then it became my business. The first time I heard my name in one of her narratives, I was told about it secondhand. A colleague I was friendly with came to me after a team meeting and said, quietly, that she wanted me to know that there was something being said about how I had gotten my role. I thanked her. I felt something cold and flat settle in my stomach, and I decided to wait. I decided to wait because I knew that the best response to a false narrative is not an argument. Arguments are easy to reframe as defensiveness. The best response is a track record. Do the work. Do it consistently. Do it well. Let the work be visible. Let time do what time does. For the next several months, I did exactly that. I led a project that came in ahead of schedule. I produced a client report that the director singled out in a team-wide email as the standard for how those reports should be done. I took on an additional workload during a period when 2 team members were out, and I handled it without drama, without requests for recognition, without anything other than quiet delivery. And the narrative about me was still there. I could feel it in certain rooms, in the way some people looked at me when I spoke in meetings, as if they were measuring my words against a question they already had about whether I was the real thing or not. But I kept working, because the work was real, and real things, given time, tend to become visible. Let me tell you something now. I want to say it directly to you, whoever you are watching this right now. Have you ever been in an environment where someone was working to define you before you could define yourself? Where your reputation was being written by someone else, in rooms you were not in conversations you were not part of? If you have, you know that particular kind of helplessness. And I want you to know that it is not permanent. The narrative someone else writes about you only holds as long as the evidence supports it. And you have more control over the evidence than they do. Keep watching. Because what happened on that Tuesday morning in the break room is the moment all of that evidence came together in a way I had not planned and could not have scripted. I was standing in the doorway. The room had gone quiet. She had seen me. Her mug was still in her hand. The expression on her face went through a small but visible recalibration, the kind a person's face does when they realize the situation they are in is different from the one they thought they were in 30 seconds ago. I walked into the room. I went to the counter and poured myself a cup of coffee. I did not look at her while I did this. I was completely calm, not performed calm. The real kind, the kind that comes from having made a decision before the moment arrives. When I turned around, I looked at her directly, and I said, clearly and without any sharpness in my voice, "I want to address something I heard when I walked in." She opened her mouth. I continued, not rudely, not with raised volume, just with the kind of steadiness that does not leave room for interruption. I said, "The director and I worked together briefly 3 years ago. We have not spoken since. He did not recommend me for this position. I applied through the public listing. I went through the same interview process everyone else goes through. I passed the same assessment, and in the 14 months I have been here, I have led the client reporting project, which finished ahead of schedule, and produced the report that was cited by the director as the template for the team." I paused. "That is my track record. It is in the system. Anyone can see it." I picked up my coffee. The room was completely still. The person heating up leftovers had stopped watching the microwave and was watching me instead. The woman who had been looking carefully at her coffee was now looking at me. And then something happened that I did not expect. The woman who sat near me, the one who had been avoiding the conversation by examining her mug, looked up at her and said, quietly but audibly, "I think we have all seen the work. I think that is pretty clear." It was not a long speech. It was one sentence, but it was spoken by someone who had been in the room the whole time and had not said it before that moment, and its effect was immediate. It was the moment when the story that had been running under the surface of my workplace, quietly, in break rooms and hushed conversations, ran out of oxygen. The woman with the mug did not respond. She looked at the person who had spoken. She looked at me. She put her mug down, and she left the room. I stayed. I finished my coffee. I talked briefly to a couple of the people who remained about ordinary things, the project timeline, the weather, nothing related to what had just happened. I wanted the temperature of the room to return to normal. I wanted it to be clear that I had not come into that room to cause a scene. I had come in for coffee. I had said what needed to be said, and now we were moving forward. The woman and I did not have a dramatic confrontation after that. We did not have a reconciliation scene or an apology or a conversation that cleared the air between us in any complete way. What happened was quieter and, in some ways, more significant. The narrative stopped. It simply stopped. I do not know exactly what shifted. Maybe the things I said in the break room made its way through the office in the way things do. Maybe people had already been forming their own views based on the work, and the break room moment just crystallized something. Maybe she herself decided, for whatever reason, to stop. But I stopped hearing my name in rooms I was not in. I stopped feeling that particular question in the eyes of certain colleagues. The air changed. She transferred to a different team 6 weeks later. She had requested it, I was told. I do not know her reasons, and I did not ask. I hope she found what she was looking for. I want to tell you the thing I took from this experience, because it is different from what you might expect. I did not take as my lesson that you need to stand up and call people out publicly when they are lying about you. That is one tool, and sometimes it is the right one, but it is not the main thing. The main thing I took was this: your work is your argument, your consistency is your evidence. Your output, shown up for day after day, month after month, in rooms where not everyone believes in you, that is the most powerful counter-narrative you can build. You do not have to announce it. You do not have to defend it. You just have to produce it. And let time do what time does. People who build narratives about others, people who reframe other people's success as luck or connection or favoritism, they are almost always doing it because they are afraid. Afraid that if your success is real, it means they have to look at their own situation differently. If you earned it, they have to ask themselves why they have not earned the same. It is easier to believe the playing field is not fair than to believe the work is the variable. That is a painful thought, and most people will do a lot to avoid it. I am not saying that unfair advantages do not exist. They do. The world is not a meritocracy, and anyone who tells you it is completely has not been paying close enough attention. But the specific story she was telling about me was not true. And when untrue stories are built on thin evidence, the work is the thing that dismantles them. Quietly, consistently, over time. Do not stop working because someone is telling a false story about you. Work harder. Work more visibly. Produce things that are undeniable. Let the evidence accumulate. because the truth always finds a way. And when it finds its way into the right room at the right moment, you will not even need to raise your voice. You will just need to point to what you built. That is the real power, not the moment in the break room, the 14 months before it. Every day of those 14 months, that is where the story was actually won. If what I shared today landed for you, please share this video with someone who is in the middle of their own 14 months. Someone who is working in a room where not everyone believes them yet. Someone who needs to hear that the work is the answer. Tea time is on their side. That the truth is building, quietly, whether anyone can see it yet or not. And if you have not subscribed, please do it now. Every week I share another one of these stories, about patience and dignity and the quiet, powerful moment when truth finally becomes undeniable. Click the video on your screen right now. I will see you in the next one.